Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to After the Rupture, Turning Conflict into Repair, Trust, and Growth, a session that was presented at Children's Institute 2026 in Schaumburg, Illinois.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Oh, this is so awesome. Thank you so much. Everyone is in the same row. So 3, 6, 9, 12 is the perfect number, right? I hope that you are doing well today. My name is KJ Williams. I am the CEO and co-founder of RISEWITHUS. And
I am AJ Williams, and I am co-founder, managing director of RISEWITHUS.
And we are so happy to be here today. We were trying to figure out this morning how many times we've been invited to present at the ABA, and I landed on about 6, not quite sure, but this is the first time that we are sharing after the rupture. And so we're really excited about that. We're going to ask that those of you that are coming in, you can sit anywhere you like. Just make sure you're sitting with other people, because this is a talking and engaging interactive workshop. Okay. So today we are here to talk about after the rupture and what it means to turn conflict into repair, trust, and growth. So usually we are discussing how to navigate and move through conflict, right? That's kind of our jam. But now we are moving into, what do you do after conflict has taken place? How do you recover? How do you repair? How do you recenter yourself? How do you find your way back to a place of balance? So that's where we're going today. And the time is going to go by fairly quickly. So I'm going to let AJ take it away.
So very quickly, if you've been here before, you're used to some of these norms here, but a bit of housekeeping. First, there's the QR code for slides and handouts. So the handout you have here, and then the slide deck that we're going through today. Also, the survey. The survey is very helpful. The reason that we've been here so many times is because we are receiving feedback, but also it helps us grow. And so for you to continue to have a quality experience, please fill out the survey. Recordings will be online. Please silence your cell phones. And as we are having sharebacks, we will give you the mic so we can ensure everyone can hear your voice. And with that said, for this session, it's very important to us to acknowledge that together we know a lot. KJ and I, we're in our positions, but we don't consider ourselves experts. We're in this work. We do it often. We have some knowledge, but so do you. And so what makes our sessions quality is how we incorporate other people's voices and experiences. And the truth is, no other human being has the exact experience that you have. And so we need to hear your voice and insights. And then the antitrust guidelines quickly. Of course, you can share ideas, collaborate, but you are not to talk about price or pricing policies, boycotts, or dividing up the market. All right, KJ.
All right. Actually, go back to that other slide. Before we get started, since we're going to be talking about conflict and repair after conflict, I'd like for you to just take a moment and introduce yourselves to those at your table. You can just share your name. You can share where you live, your address, your email address, all of your personal information, because that's what we do, right? So let's just break the ice a little bit. That was a joke, by the way. That was not literal. All right, let's break the ice a little bit, and we'll just take maybe 2 minutes and just get to know the folks at your table, okay? And then we'll jump into the content. Okay, are we all introduced to everyone at our table? Did we get it? All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right. For those of you that are eating, I hope you're into sharing. I haven't had breakfast this morning, And so as I come around the table, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Please enjoy yourself. So we're going to start with the opening reflection. And what we're going to ask you to do is just take a moment or two. And first, you're going to think of a conflict or disappointment or some kind of rupture that has already taken place in your life, but it's still sitting with you. It still comes back up for you. It may have happened years ago, or it might have happened this week. It may have taken place with someone that you deeply love or someone that you didn't have a close relationship with. It might have been a family engagement, or it might have been something that was professionally related. But for some reason, it sticks with you. Do you all hear the echo? It's not bad? Okay. All right. Makes me feel like I'm in some kind of chamber and I want to make weird voices or sounds, you know? All right. So, but what makes it significant still today? Why is it still coming up for you? What kinds of events or feelings or thoughts or visual images bring it back up for you? What triggers it for you today? You don't have to share the details unless you want to. We want everyone to feel safe. And what we mean by that is you do not need to share anything that makes you uncomfortable, right? Share to your, thank you so much. You love me. Thank you. All right. So we want you to share within the confines of your own personal boundaries. So you're going to hold on to this particular event, rupture, conflict, as we move throughout our time together. Although you can think of another one, right, as we move on. All right. So we're going to give you
let's give you about a minute and a half. I know that's super precise, to write down some thoughts in terms of this event, this rupture that's up for you and what stands out about it, why it's still present for you. And then in small groups, share what feels comfortable for you to share. But let's take a minute and a half, write out what's standing out to you about this rupture and why.
And then we will cue you as to when you can begin discussing in the small groups. Okay?
Okay. Go ahead and let those last thoughts come out. We're going to transition to your small group conversations. And just take time to share what's up for you about that rupture. Again, you don't have to share details, but more so, this thing stuck with me because X. This is what I still think about when it comes up. This is how it makes me feel. You don't have to share details. So let's go ahead and have that small group conversation, and then KJ and I will call you back when it's time.
I noticed that some folks are still writing individually in their reflections. So let's make a little adjustment. When everyone at your table has finished their individual reflection, then you go ahead and start the conversation, okay? And we'll just keep our eye on things.
All right. So in small groups, you had a chance to share. We're wondering, hearing one another talk about the different ruptures that are still present, what stood out to you in terms of why these things stick, what's happening for us emotionally or psychologically? What stood out to you in the conversation?
Our group was talking about, our conflicts, and we found a through line of the booksellers caring so much and making it a part of their identity that it gets very sticky within the business side of everything.
Caring so much that whatever is happening is attached to your identity. And so that rupture sticks with you because it's impacting your sense of self-worth, value, things like that. Okay. What else stood out?
That a lot of the conflicts arose from expectations that were not, people having different expectations and they weren't meshing.
Clarifying question?
Sure.
Not meshing, does that mean they didn't mesh because the expectations were not understood clearly, there wasn't clarity, or because they were clashing?
I would say because there wasn't clarity in the first place for a lot of things.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else stand out?
Just to echo what you all were saying at your table, just the sense of not wanting to hurt someone else's feelings and how do you approach it? And sometimes it can be a difficult thing to do.
What I'm hearing in that is a prioritizing of the feelings and impact and experience of others, even though you too have been impacted, caring so much that the other person is prioritized in their experience. Yes? Okay.
Any other themes? Well, I can say what stands out to me is that when we think about rupture, not only does it leave us in a place of how it impacts that one-on-one exchange, but it also impacts our relationship with ourselves, meaning if we're not speaking up about what we care about, what does that do over time? What does that do in terms of what are we telling ourselves? And the consequences can build far beyond that moment because it carries forward in terms of how we engage with other people. And then again, how we continue to engage with ourselves. And we're going to unpack some of that throughout our conversation today. KJ, is there anything that stood out for you?
Just that I think ruptures, regardless of where they happen and who they happen with, when it's something that stays with us, that generally means that it's left its mark, right? And what I believe the majority of us as humans fail to see for different reasons is that we actually have the power and get to determine what that mark looks like, how much power that mark has, and what we want to do about it. But usually we've learned how to live with the mark that the rupture has left, or the wound that the rupture has left, or the scar. We're very, very good at learning to live with it and just finding a way to move through life. And I think with the theme that I've heard this morning already around the deep caring and nurturing nature of those in the book selling industry, that because of that caring nature, you're more likely to allow those wounds and those scars to remain and learn how to just work with them being present, right? So I think that we're going to have a great conversation today. And it's not just you, it's us too. That's why the content is here. All right.
I'll add that because of the caring nature, what I understand under that is that you actually care about the experiences other people are having. And where possible, you want to offer transformational experiences to other people to improve their quality of life, to improve their sense of being. And when we fail to actually unpack, be overt about what's happening, we limit not only our own transformation, but then how we can show up for other people and what we offer them when we speak difficult things, because that's a part of the other person's growth as well. And as human beings, we're constantly in this exchange. And when we don't do it in a conscious way, the impacts are pretty severe. And we see it play out in our society today. A lot of what we're dealing with is conflict that never got processed, and moving forward with conclusions and different ways of seeing the world and ourselves and other people. And they clash because under all of this is a need and desire that we all have, whatever's happening in any exchange, whether we talk about expectations that are not aligned. People have expectations that are motivated from something that they care about, value, some way they're trying to protect themselves. And if we don't work these things out in exchange with one another, dysfunction follows. All right. I have the clicker.
Okay, so you're like, what do you mean this is a session roadmap? Aren't we already in? We're already in the content, right? So today we're going to talk about understanding the rupture. And this is specifically going to be from your perspective, right? Because you and the other person, while you're engaged in whatever the conversation is, or the in whatever you're navigating, the only perspective you can be sure about is your own. So you're going to be understanding the rupture from your perspective, right? And then we're going to talk about exploring the impact. So this is where we talk about the ripple effect and really understanding what the rupture has meant for you, what it's meant for your way of thinking, for your way of being, for your way of engaging, for your way of processing. And then we'll look at what it means to reconnect with yourself. So basically finding your center again, because some ruptures actually disrupt our lives in pretty big ways. And that means that we have to have a method, a strategy, some time to reflect and find our way back to our center, right? Finding that balance. And then we get to choose what comes next. And this is where we are talking about a choice that is both intentional and conscious. We're not just reacting, and we're not just responding. We are making an intentional, conscious choice about how we're going to move forward. And then what it means to rebuild with intention. This is where we are developing new muscles and learning how to exercise those muscles within the choice that we've made, within the direction that we've chosen. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about growing from the experience. And this is where we get to stretch and flex the new muscles that we've developed through the rupture process and the healing process, and really discuss, what does it mean now? How do I rebuild, and what do I want to rebuild? So we're going to talk about all of those things today. Any questions? No? All right. No? Okay. Oh, I thought we had oh, I see what you did. She changed the slide a little bit, so I was confused. All right, so what is a rupture? A rupture is a sudden event or an accumulation of experiences that causes trust, connection, understanding, or safety to break, tear, or give way, fundamentally changing a person, a relationship, or a system. So what we know is that when we've experienced a rupture, it changes or has the potential to change absolutely everything. Where before I might have been, can I use your name? So let's say that Chawa and I have been working together for 11 years, and we've gotten along well. We've never really had big disagreements. We've always been able to find a way to compromise. And this particular day, I'm not in a great space. And I've got some things going on that I've not communicated to anyone, and no one understands. Everyone just knows that I've come to work and I'm not my usual self. I'm not bubbly. I'm not joyful. I'm really not making eye contact. But Chawa and I have to work on a project that's pretty important today. And she's trying to give me ideas and trying to engage me in conversation. And I'm watching her become more and more frustrated. But inside of me, what I'm saying is that she doesn't understand. I wish she would back up and give me some space. And eventually she gets frustrated and she walks away, right? She takes a deep breath. She comes back. She tries to engage me in dialogue. And instead of me being open, I say to her, Chawa, I'm just not in the place where I feel like talking to you right now or talking to anyone. Can you just please leave me alone? Now, imagine how you might receive that response. After 11 years, she might say, okay, this is not how KJ usually is, right? And so obviously something is going on with her. But also, after 11 years, she might say, wow, like I didn't deserve that. I thought I knew her. I would not have expected something like this. And actually my feelings are hurt because customers are around, other staff were around, and they heard me. They heard what she said to me. So that kind of rupture can happen where trust is broken even after being in relationship for quite some time, right? And so the trust that we used to have, it's broken, it's disrupted, but we still have to work together, right? But now we have to work together. And because of the way I've engaged and how I've impacted Chawa, her expectations have now shifted in relation to, or in respect to being in relationship with me, right? Whereas before, she always had the expectation that she and I could work things out. Even if we didn't agree, through conversation, we would come to a place of agreement. But now she does not necessarily have that same expectation because of the experience that I gave her. The communication has broken down because I actually did not communicate. And her attempts to communicate with me, her attempts to understand, were not met with openness. I was not open for many different reasons. Psychological safety is being impacted. The big thing that happened in this scenario is the embarrassment that Chawa felt about, did I pronounce it? I'm still pronouncing it correctly? Okay. That she experienced because other staff were around, even though they weren't close, and there were a couple of customers. And so now, I don't know if I can actually ask you this question right here because I don't know how you're going to respond, and I'm not sure that it's safe for me to do so, right? And then last but not least, the connection is damaged. It doesn't mean that it can't be repaired, but there were many layers to the rupture that happened. And so our connection is damaged, but it can be repaired, but it's going to require some work. AJ, what would you like to add here? All right. Okay, so here we're talking about why ruptures matter. And this is where we talk about the ripple effect. So we say a difficult conversation may last for 10 minutes, but the impact may last for months. And when you think about the conversation that you were having at your table, can someone, well, I'm going to do it this way. How long ago did the rupture happen? So for those where the rupture happened in the last week, can you raise your hand? The last month? The last 3 months? Last 6 months? Last 9 months? The last year? Okay. Last year and a half? 2 years? 3 years? Between 2 and 3 years? 4 years? 5 years? 6 years? 7 years or more? Okay. So we've got a full range, right? And if we really dug in deep, we might have someone in here where the rupture happened 15 or 20 years ago, right? What I can say is that there are still things that have happened 15 years ago for me that still come up And even though I've gone to therapy and I've done all my self-help work and all my self-development work, sometimes it still takes my breath away. And I have to remember, oh yeah, wait a minute. No, I'm not angry about that anymore. That's right. I actually did the work. But I have to remind my body that we did the work, because some ruptures are so painful and they change our lives so fundamentally that we may never forget about them, and our bodies may never totally forget about them. But if we can do the work necessary to heal and rebalance ourselves, then we can remind our bodies and our minds that, oh, wait, we've done that work. We don't have to allow it to define how we move forward. Right? So I'm going to stop there and see if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I was thinking about how ruptures, they reveal something to us about the relationship we were in, and the quality of that, but they also reveal something to us about ourselves, because they reflect, in terms of how we move forward, they reflect something about what we believe. They reflect our fears. The way we move forward reflects where we are with our self-worth and confidence. And so even though ruptures are very painful, they are also opportunities to slow down and actually decide how you want to rebuild with intention, which is, later in the steps. But they are very much opportunities. As much as they hurt, they allow some things to come to the surface and give us an opportunity to deal with the structure of our being and decide, how do I want to move forward? So ruptures are a very important experience, very important, painful experience, but a very important experience. And it's important to see the opportunity that arises in that moment.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and have you look at page 3 of your workbook. All right. And down at the bottom, it says in the reflection, think of a rupture that has stayed with you. What makes it significant even today? So earlier we asked you to just kind of share about the rupture. And you didn't have to share details, but how it impacted you. And what I want you to think about now is, why is the rupture important today? How does it show up today? By important, I don't mean that it's not in the positive sense, but and it might be positive, but how does the rupture show up today? Why is it still present? I'm getting away from the language in the workbook, so I apologize. What makes it significant? That's the word I'm looking for. What makes it significant today? And that can be a positive, or it can be something that's challenging. All right. And we're going to give you, got like 5 people at each table. So maybe, do I have any mathematicians in here? No? All right. Fine. I need those who read the math books. All right. Let's start with 10 minutes. Okay. And then we're going to check in with you, because I don't want you to feel rushed. But we also don't want to, belabor the point. So 10 minutes. All right. And you can talk about that question at the bottom of page 3. Going to bring you back. Are we ready to come back? Was that enough time? Yes? Was it too much time? Perfect? Okay. All right. Fantastic. So I am running the mic this time. We had a whole argument about it. Just kidding. Yes, there was a rupture. There was a rupture in the front of the room and no one knew about it but us. The best kind of rupture. Okay. So, why is this still significant today for you? Why? Or just share the thoughts that have come up for you. Okay? So, who would like this mic? Here we go. And can you say your name for us before you speak?
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I guess the theme here was what made it last is the questioning our decision making and what we do moving forward and having that question going on. Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough? Can I justify this decision?
So what I'm hearing is that when the rupture happened, it left you actually questioning whether or not you did the right thing. So there was a sense of internal confusion, and not feeling settled about whatever decision was made. Right? And yet the decision was already made. So you had to find yourself, find a way to a place of peace for yourself. Right? Okay, that's a tough place. I think we can all identify with that in some way, shape, or form. Thank you for sharing that, Caitlin. And we're going to talk about how to get to that place of balance and peace in just a little bit. Okay. All right. Who else? What was significant? Why is it still significant today is the question. Well, this is unique with the booksellers, I'm going to tell you.
Hi, I'm Madeline. This is sort of general for our table, but we noticed that many of our issues are still having impacts on us on our day-to-day, even now, even if it's months or years out.
Can I ask a follow-up question? How is that you're saying it's showing up daily and it still impacts? How is that showing up?
For some of us, it's in our relationships and how we work with the coworkers that we had the ruptures with. For some of us, it's just in how we feel and just sort of long-term lingering, almost like toxicity or trauma with our teens.
Mm-hmm. So some things still haven't been processed through. There's not been real resolution. So it's showing up some way, some form in how you're relating to each other and then the feelings that you're carrying.
It feels like for most of us, like a resolution was reached, but the feelings around the resolution have still been unresolved. Does that seem? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
You could take it back, KJ.
All right. So, what I'm hearing is there is the residue from the disruption, right? There's an emotional residue that's left, and there is a process of releasing that needs to still happen. That often we don't consciously think about after a rupture has taken place. We're like, okay, I've resolved it by X, Y, Z means, and I've gotten to a place where I'm ready to move on. But we move on, and then we find ourselves being activated or triggered years later or months later, and by something that reminds us of that original rupture. And then we are literally flooded with those same feelings or those same thoughts. And that is because we have not gone through a process of not just healing, but actually releasing those emotions and those thoughts, and that experience from having power in our life. And I know that can sound a little ambiguous, but there is a very real reality around our nervous systems and how when a rupture takes place, our literal nervous system is impacted and it reorients itself to the rupture and however we decide to respond to that rupture. And if our nervous systems have reoriented itself in a way that does not truly bring us balance and a recentering, then when a reminder pops up again, we are suddenly off kilter. We are suddenly flooded. We are suddenly experiencing some level and form of PTSD of the original rupture. So that releasing is really necessary. And it's more than just the mental thought that I've let it go. I'm going to let it go. I forgave them. I'm letting it go. Okay, I can work with you. Even though every time I look at you, I am reminded of the things that you said to me. You know, we have to find a way to release, right? And so we'll talk about some of those strategies before we leave today.
Yeah, what stood out to me is that, one, emotions are information. And so when things are showing up daily, what I begin to question is, even though resolution happened, did reconciliation happen? And we're going to talk about the difference. But I imagine other people, not just you, are feeling the residual and recognize everything isn't really okay, but we're going to pretend like everything is okay. And I have a question. Who in here is in a space of positional authority within your bookstore context? Oh, so many of you. Okay. All right. So this session is not about the structure of the organization. It's about individuals. But what I will say is that the container that's provided matters very much. So as someone with positional authority, how you facilitate processes matter. We don't want to just stop at resolution, because we recognize that stuff is still in the air and we haven't actually facilitated repair or reconciliation. And you can't always dictate that for other people, but you can hold standards and expectations. And when people fall short, you recognize this is a toxic environment, and then you deal with that appropriately from a personnel perspective. But also think about over here when you shared about confidence and self-trust, right? Because what's coming up is, I chose to navigate this situation in this way. It didn't in the way that I wanted it to. It had some consequences and costs that didn't feel good. I'm afraid of replicating that, right? But your system has to have space for you not to be perfect, that we just aren't perfect. But what we do after we learn about those things, how we internalize messages, because a part of it could be, it's not that you did something wrong. It's that the person didn't like what you did and you got a certain response and that response felt uncomfortable for you. Or it could be, I did have a misstep, but how do we have places to recover? How do we facilitate that clarity? And that's a part of the organization space to hold. Again, we're not doing that conversation here. I can't say a whole bunch, otherwise I'll distract from that. But that's an important element to recognize and bring into the room. KJ, is there something you'd like to add?
Just that I'm in complete agreement, and that's our conflict philosophy, conflict framework workshop.
Whole different branch of the experience. But there's still something to do at the individual level with all of these things. So we'll talk about it. Any other themes that came up before we move on? Because again, together we know a lot. Someone might need to hear exactly what you bring up.
See, I know that was good.
My name is Betsy, and something that came up at our table was the worry, anxiety, or fear of being blindsided by a rupture like that again. Either going into it, if it was a friendship that, or more close relationship where you didn't see that coming, and then suddenly there was this conflict, and whether it got resolved or not, just worrying that might happen out of nowhere again for you, and just not being able to be prepared for it.
That makes me think about how KJ brought in our nervous systems, and our nervous system holding wow, that was really impactful. I don't want that to happen again. And then we get in a protective stance, holding hypervigilance, even though it's in the background. It's actually very draining. It keeps us from being very present. And then we're trying to protect ourselves by controlling, by avoiding. And all of these things actually cost something to engage in those ways of being. And that cost builds up over time. We can rarely really guard against the unknown and unseen, and constantly being in that space means that's what you are seeing, and you're not seeing the opportunities of other things. You're not seeing different things that are actually present because you're hyper focused on things that bring up fear. KJ?
I think it is an almost human response when you experience an unexpected trauma, which is the way that I would categorize what you shared. Is it Betsy? Because it was unexpected. You were blindsided, right? And being blindsided means that you didn't feel prepared to respond. And depending on how your nervous system are like naturally designed, if you are a person that naturally is self-reflective and usually internalizes things and needs time to process, an event that happens that is a blindsiding event is going to cause you to shut down even more because you didn't have the chance to prepare, right? For someone else, if you're wired like I am, has anyone heard of the Thomas Kilmann conflict styles assessment? No? Okay. There are 5 conflict styles, and this is Western centric, so I want to own that, right? So you have collaborating, compromising, accommodating, competing, and avoiding, right? I'm a competitor, which means that I don't run away from conflict. Now, it's not that I'm running to conflict. I'm not coming to your table looking to have conflict with you, okay? But it does mean that if something blindsides me, if an unexpected event happens, my nervous system is wired to stand and ready to generally protect everyone that I love and care about in the vicinity. And I can't do that if I shut down. That's how I'm wired. My 2 daughters are the exact opposite. They're not necessarily avoiders, but their systems, they get, what is it? They freeze. Right? They actually freeze and they need time to process. So if they get blindsided, which they had an event where they were at a store, I promise not to go off on too much of a tangent. They were at a store and a young man, they were at a Jersey Mike's, and a young man that was making the sandwiches was extremely rude to my 15-year-old. Well, my 20-some-year-old was present off at the register. They both heard him and they both literally froze. Right? So they couldn't even respond in the moment. And then they felt angry and upset afterwards. But when they came home to tell mom, they just wanted to chain me to a chair because my competing, right, was like, oh, get in the car. Let's go. We're going back to Jersey Mike's. We're getting free sandwiches. He's going to get a talking to. I don't want to get him fired. I want to teach him this is how you treat people. So all of that just to say that when we have those kind of events, we respond differently, right? And so it takes us some time to actually process. What are you going to say, AJ?
Yeah, I was just going to give some definitions and distinctions because I don't want to assume we all have the same level of information. When we refer to the nervous system, we're talking about how our bodies process threats. And then there's the reality of our physiological responses, that flight, freeze, appease, becoming flooded, how your heart, races, and all of those things are dynamics we're dealing with in moments, and they're things we can't control. And for me, given how I'm wired, I'm quick to demonize those things like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. But you have real biology that's happening. And so you have to embrace that reality about who you are, and still you have the opportunity to act with intention. Each and every one of us, and all of us are navigating this dynamic. So for her competing self, it may be praised in society in this way and demonized in society the next way. All of us can be embraced for how we respond and then internally feel some different way about it. So you're an agreeable person. You always say yes, and you're drained and you're unhappy and you're not speaking your truth. Do you want to be liked more than you want to have a sense of well-being within yourself? These are real questions to face and slow down and think about, what am I valuing? What's important to me? What's the cost? How do I want to move forward? And we're going to talk about that.
Last thing that I'll say about the response to being blindsided, as Betsy, I can't remember if you use this language or not, but I know that AJ did in her response, the idea of protecting ourselves, right? Because I don't want this to happen again. And so what we want to do is not protect, we want to prepare, because we can't control the external environment. We can't promise ourselves that it will never happen again, because you can't control other people, right? But we can prepare ourselves if it happens again, if it happens again. And that preparation is different than protection, because protection is about throwing up barriers, right? Ensuring that we are strong enough, ensuring that we're not going to allow ourselves to be hurt. But preparing is more about understanding who we are and the strengths that we have, and sitting and standing in the validity of our worth, so that when we are blindsided, regardless of who it is and what is said, it does not detract from our self-worth. It does not detract from our self-value. It does not cause us to go into a tailspin. So then we feel as though there's something we should apologize for, something we should have done better, something we could have done to prevent the blindsiding event itself. All right. Okay. We're going to move you on. You're like, how are we going to get through the whole workbook? It's only 4 pages and it's 10:13. All right. We're going to do it though. All right. So 3 words. What we have here. So many folks use these words interchangeably: healing, repair, and reconciliation. But we're going to separate these words. So when we're talking about healing, we're talking about the work that we do within our own individual selves. And the way that we get to this place of healing is making meaning about what happened, right? And reconnecting with ourselves in that. What we know is that healing can happen whether the relationship continues or not. And that's a really important thing. Healing can happen whether the relationship continues or not, because healing is about healing ourselves from the inside out. And then when we talk about repair, we're talking about repair from the stance of the relational stance. And so repair actually requires action. And this is the repair that we create with one another, between ourselves. So in order to repair, we have to acknowledge the harm. We have to take accountability, and that will help to start rebuilding the trust. Now, when I'm talking about this from the individual perspective, not from the perspective of what the other person needs to do, okay? Because we can't control that. So then we talk about reconciliation, and this is a choice, right? Because we need to engage in healing, because we need that for our individual selves. We can engage in repair if we want to maintain the relationship, and especially in the context of work, it is extremely helpful if we engage in repair efforts so that we're not glaring at each other every time we come to work. But with reconciliation, like, I can repair with you, but that does not mean that I want to reconcile with you. So Chawa, did I pronounce it right? Okay. Chawa and I, we may go through the process. Both of us have done our individual healing. And actually, Chawa has done her individual healing because I was the one who actually created the harm in that engagement. And we have rebuilt or repaired our relationship enough that we can work together. But Chawa has now decided that she doesn't want to go into the step of reconciliation, because the rupture, it was just too hard, right? And so reconciliation is where we choose whether or not the relationship continues. And if it does continue, We choose how it continues. So now Chawa is friendly to me, but she doesn't go to lunch with me anymore. But she says hi to me, and that has to be enough. Okay.
I'll say this about repair for everyone with positional authority, for all of us, but particularly like thinking about the culture you're facilitating. Recognize that repair requires that you don't just look at the surface behavior, but you look at what is the motivation, what is the unmet need, what is the hurt, the fear, the loss, and surfacing that allows you to figure out what is it that I need to steward and respond to. That doesn't mean you excuse the behavior or the impact, but if you're going to facilitate repair, it does require to understand why is this occurring? What is that core motivation under whatever you might see as the problematic behavior? And then the accountability to steward is still about the behavior and the impact. But as a person with positional authority, a part of your stewardship is what's under that and how can I be responsive? And it's not easy. It does cost something emotionally, at least for me, but it's an important part of repair. Okay.
All right. So healing and reconciliation. Not every relationship returns to what it was, and not every relationship should. Some ruptures are good for us. That's just the bottom line. Even if they don't feel good in the moment, in reflection, we look back and we're able to say, wow, I'm actually glad that rupture happened because it opened my eyes to so many things that I just was not aware of. And so the reality is that you can heal without reconciliation, right? You can heal without reconciliation, and you can reconcile without fully healing. You can do that. Many of us have stayed in relationships and friendships and family ships, and we've reconciled, but we're not healed. And you can attempt to repair without fully restoring the relationship, which is the example that I gave earlier with Chawa and I. And so I think, the key here is just recognizing that healing, sorry about that, can happen on your own. It's an internal process. We talk about healing happening from the inside out. It's a phrase we like to use. And healing is always available. Reconciliation actually requires action, and it requires others, right? You're reconciling with someone else. It's a relational process, and it's not always possible because either you're not willing or the other person is not willing. And so there's only so much you can control. All right. Okay, so we are going into step 1 now, and this is on page 5 of your workbook. Now you might have, let's do this because, let me just ask this question. Can you put the breakout slide up there so they can see what I'm looking at? Okay. All right. The small group reflection questions. Do you feel like you have answered all these questions already in your discussions? Okay. But number 3, also, what remains unresolved? Yeah. Okay. That's what I had a sense. Okay. So you're already ahead of us. Okay. You cannot repair what you refuse to name. So, and what I want to say here is we're talking about a rupture, and often we think about what the other person has done, but there is a place of self-accountability in how you showed up to help the rupture take place, right? Because sometimes that happens, that we are an active participant in the rupture that we've experienced. So maybe AJ and I started off having a great conversation, and I noted that she got escalated. So then why not? I'm escalating now as well. Why should I be the one to be the peacekeeper, right? And so as we both escalate, we both have responsibility because now the rupture is taking place. So that said, let's go ahead. Well, AJ, what do you want to add here?
I just want to read a couple notes that I wrote that I think are important. So
all right, fantastic.
Sometimes we avoid examining what's really happening because it would require us to face a painful truth about ourselves or the relationship. And a rupture doesn't just leave us hurt. It can leave us defending a version of ourselves or the story that feels safest to believe. So connected to what KJ is saying, like examining for your own impact, and how you showed up, but also there's a cost to the examination and whatever is surfacing, and the fear that a relationship might be lost, dynamics of what that means for you and your sense of belonging, connection, abandonment, all that. But if we move forward in a way that's not honest and is built on some level of avoidance or falsehood, the cost increases. We have emotional debt that then follows us, a lack of peace, how we're giving our energy, how we're growing or not growing. All those things matter when you think about how am I examining what happened? What do I need to name? What do I need to face? That's it.
All right. I think that was great. Thank you, AJ. All right, we're going to go to step 2. Understand the impact. And we've talked about the impact quite a bit. So what I want to ask you to do is to go to page 6. And I want you to engage the activity. This is the ripple effect that we referred to earlier, and identifying all the areas that changed, were harmed, or disrupted because of the original rupture. And you might even add some that we have not identified, okay? And then the discussion questions are at the bottom. So first we're going to give you like a minute and a half to kind of think through it.
All right. I see we're going into our group conversations right now. And actually, I want to try a large group conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. We have 3 different reflection questions here, whichever one is resonating with you. But what impact surprised you the most? What does this reveal about the lasting impacts of rupture? What stood out to you? Let's talk about it.
My name's Laura. We were just talking about all of these things, that all of these checkboxes hit the mark for all of us. The only thing that we kind of said, like the sense of safety, I think it's more of like not a physical sense of safety. It was more of like an emotional sense of safety. So then we started talking about like how great your conversation is and how it brings up so much for us and how our bodies respond, not just from an emotional standpoint, but also a physical standpoint. And how can you be present? How can you own that response in your life and then move forward?
That's a real thing. Thank you for sharing that. Did that resonate with other people? That emotional sense of impact that stays. And so what happens, how does that play out for you when you feel like you lack emotional safety? How has that played out when you think about that scenario in terms of how you're showing up, how you're speaking up, how you're getting your needs met? I imagine it varies depending on how we're wired.
Hi, my name's Megan. I think that you mentioned it earlier, is that it's sort of an opportunity for self-transformation. A lot of these things like my work ethic, my physical well-being, the rupture in question really made me assess how much effort I'm putting in and whether that's going above and beyond my own expectations and the expectations of others, and really tending to myself first, and knowing that you have to go into those conversations with your own established boundaries.
Definitely having your own established boundaries, being grounded, being rooted, is important, because you can give, and be depleted. And these things are sticking with you, and you don't even actually know what's going on for the other person, is the reality as well. So thinking about, how am I investing and what's the outcome? We like to talk about something called the return in relational investment. And depending on how we show up in these moments, it can offer some transformation and growth and things. But the return of relational investment with yourself matters as well, not just other people. How am I willing to invest in myself in this moment, to resource myself, to prioritize myself, because nobody else can do it, right? It matters. What else came up? Nothing.
Hi, I'm Anna. I had been going through this thinking about like a work relationship originally, but then this one kind of made me think more about like a personal relationship that was very traumatic. But having it on the paper in front of me and having to look at all of these little boxes and then be like, oh, that one, oh, that one, oh, that too, really made me think about how that one single relationship has affected every single relationship I've had ever since then, in like such obvious ways that just like a light bulb went off and I was like, oh, whoops, that's all linked back to that one single person. And it's like a little jarring to think about how that's affecting everything in my life now still, and will continue to do that moving forward. But I think also I can look back and see how each relationship since then has been a little bit like the impact on that relationship has been better after each one too, because I'm learning something in each one. And then hopefully one day it'll just be perfect and I'll be perfect and everything will be great. Which is not true, but it's really, really helpful to think about how that is like growing me as a person, even though in those times it felt like the worst things that could possibly be happening.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it can grow you well, or it can make you wither and die. I'm doing gardening right now as a part-time job. Like I'm learning how to do stuff. And so I'm thinking about plants when you're saying that, like, oh, this is what happens when you put this plant next to the other one. But yeah, it really does impact how we grow, and growing with intention truly does matter. But it also makes me think about how past experiences can hold so much power over us. And we don't want them to have power over us. We want something more like power with, or we want something, like how can we shift that? Because I think about different things and I'm like, yeah, I don't want the conclusions of an 8-year-old or a 17-year-old or a 21-year-old. Whenever that experience happened, I don't want that controlling my life now. What do I need to look at and assess? And how can I move forward differently? And those hard situations, they do transform us. They're vehicles of growth, and they're a part of the human experience. What are we going to do with it? It's not going anywhere.
I think as we close this part and we move on to the next step, is it Anna? Anna, thank you so much for sharing that. I had an image of you walking hand in hand with that defining moment that took place in your life. And moving forward, as you're walking, you get to say, oh, no, actually, it's not helpful that you come into this situation with me, right? As if you were out shopping. You can't come into this store with me. But the next store, oh, I'm going to take the lessons that I learned through this because it's applicable in this next store. right? And so we don't want to throw away everything because of that defining moment, but we do get to choose the elements that are helpful as we move forward. Because what I heard you say was, it impacted everything, and it will continue to influence things moving forward. But we get to choose what that influence looks like, what form it takes, and how much power we give that influence, right?
All right.
Okay. So
the next steps are what we do with that. You look at that list, that's like a worksheet. What do I need to do? My trust is impacted. My confidence is impacted. Now what do I do with that? Returning to yourself, step 3.
all right. So do you want to talk about the aligned frameworks? You do it so succinctly.
Okay, so Align is a framework that we use to help people develop something called a conflict philosophy, and it's about how do I show up in a way that's truly aligned with my values. And it helps us to unpack some of the inner drivers that are playing out that we are not consciously aware of. We like to talk about this space like implicit bias, meaning 98% of how we show up is very much unconscious, and it's informed by our past experiences, how we've been socialized culturally. Those of us who are socialized as female, we might tend to run to repair much quicker because we're socialized to do that. It's informed by various aspects of our identities, family, culture. So how can I be more consciously aware and make some intentional choices? So in the Align framework, we start with your values. What do I value? What's important to me? That's your anchor. That's the foundation, because you want the rest of it to be aligned with what you say you value. Then we have our lens, our beliefs. When I was talking about the socialization, family, culture, things like that, but also when we have certain beliefs about conflict, people, exchanges, that comes out. So if I believe conflict is dangerous and non-productive, then I'm going to be more avoidant. Or if I'm in a conflict situation and I believe it's always going to escalate or I'm unsafe, it's going to inform how I'm showing up. Let's be clear about some of those beliefs, and some of them need to be transformed, and others, hold on to them. They're serving you well, but you're evaluating, is this serving me well, right? And
before you go on, one point about beliefs, this is also about the beliefs that you hold about yourself, because some of us might believe that, well, I show up very well in conflict, and generally speaking, it's the other person with the problem. So we want you to challenge that belief as well, okay?
The next, intention, your posture. This is more about in conflict, what is your approach? Or in this rupture, how do I tend to approach this? You don't want to approach this from a place of being overly appeasing, for example. What posture do I want to take? What level of openness? Some of us are too open. Some of us are too closed. But what's your posture in that? Or with KJ, she's competing. That posture doesn't serve you well all the time. Sometimes it does. It helps create safety. But what's the posture you want to take when you're thinking about this particular situation you've been navigating? And then growth is about your behaviors, and do my behaviors reflect my values? So in that moment when something is happening, am I behaving in ways that feel right and aligned for what's going on? How am I showing up in my energy, my facial expressions? Am I feeling too sheepish? Am I feeling too combative? Right? So I know I have to take time, because in different situations, if my feelings are hurt, it's going to come out as aggression and defensiveness. It's hard for me to be vulnerable, right? So, but one of my values is to be honest and vulnerable. I need more time to get myself so that my behaviors, when I'm having the conversation, actually reflects what I say I value. And last but not least, navigation. And this is about emotional intelligence. So being aware, especially again, people with positional authority, of emotionally what's happening for you, but also the other person. recognizing when it's important to pause, for all of us at each stage, for real, especially if you tend to give more than you should. It's actually okay to pause. It's actually okay not to have all of the answers, but being aware of what's happening in the space emotionally is very important, and to be responsive to that. I'm noticing, actually, I feel like emotions are a bit high, at least they're elevated for me. Let's pause and come back to this. That's how emotional intelligence can show up in the process. Anything to add, KJ?
Just noting that, this says return to yourself. We generally would have taken you through a process to develop your individual conflict philosophy, where you would have already defined what your values are, what behaviors you wanted to engage in. We would have taken you through the aligned framework. And so then that is to prepare you before conflict or difficult conversations take place. And so in this aspect, this is after the rupture has happened, you're now coming back to those same values that you would have already developed, right? Just to give you a broader context.
Okay. All right, so this is a way to go through the aligned framework in regards to the current situation you've been thinking about. When you think about it, what values matter to you right now when you think about that situation and why it's still sticking with you? What values may have been hit? You can think about it through the lens of like whatever is hurting, whatever leaves you in a place of I don't have peace. You can kind of see what values are under that. And then what beliefs or assumptions might need to be challenged. When you step back from the situation and you think about some of the beliefs or assumptions that are at play, what can I be open to? What might I need to challenge? Whether that's about how you showed up or the other person, if it's about, essentially if it's about yourself or the other person, where does that live? And how do I want to approach what comes next intentionally? And again, healing does not require the other person, right? So when you think about how do I want to approach what comes next, it's more so how do I want to approach my own relationship to this? What perspective do I want to ground myself in? And that'll come out of the belief section. And then growth, what behaviors will reflect my values? This table I heard every day, it's showing up for you in your exchanges. What behaviors do you want to start to engage that are a reflection of your values? No matter how anybody else in the circumstance is behaving, how do I want to show up? Last but not least, how will I stay grounded? And this is a big one for me. How am I going to resource myself so that when I engage with said person or the next trigger, this is my intentional way of engaging? For me, often I have to remind myself, I don't have to actually take these things personally. Yes, I feel the energy coming off of the other person, but I don't have to take it personal. I don't have to allow myself to take that in, and I don't have to allow someone else to dictate how I show up and behave. I can still be this way. I can still be aligned with my values. I can still say hello. I can offer these inputs to my environment, and it doesn't have to feel extractive. But what is it for you? Anything to add, KJ?
Just that we are going to give you 5 minutes, and I just want to prepare you. We're going to give you 5 minutes to fill out the worksheet on page 7. And then we are going to ask you to actually, I want to see how far. Yeah, I think we want to ask you to work on step 3 and step 4 and step 5. Okay, because we've talked about all of these things already in so many different ways. And so now we want you to think about the rupture that you identified. And we're going to give you about, let's give you 10 minutes. Now remember, this is, you just don't have time in a 2-hour workshop to get, or to go as deep as you would like to go, but we're going to get you started on the path. Okay. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to work through step 3, 4, and 5. You don't have to build it all the way out, but this is to help generate your thinking, in taking another approach to that disruption that took place in your life. And if you have any questions, raise your hand. You got a question? No.
I just
You
want
were
to
so
say,
thoughtful looking.
I just want to say hi to our new friend. I meant
Yes.
to welcome you into the space earlier and kept getting caught up. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. So before we go into the debrief, we have 6 minutes left before we're going to let you go. I mean, not that we're holding you hostage or anything, but we like to honor your time, so we will end on time. So I just want to draw your attention to step 6, and I just want to point out 2 bullets in particular, right? Because you'll have to look at step 6 on your own time. But bullet number 2, what strengths emerged? And this is after understanding that conflict and rupture changes us, right? What strengths emerged? And what warning signs will you recognize earlier next time? Now, the warning signs are for both you and the other person, because our body gives us warning signs that AJ talked about earlier, right? Your stomach can tighten, your heartbeat starts racing. When you know that you're about to escalate or you're entering to something, your body is saying danger, 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 right? And everybody's body speaks to them very differently. But also, our body can respond to the warning signs that we're picking up from other people, okay? And so if Chawa and I, going back to that, that earlier, why is the word sitcom coming up? Scenario. Going back to that earlier scenario, she might have been able to pick up from me that, oh, KJ's voice sounds really tense, sounds really stressed, right? So I just want to draw your attention to those 2 bullet points as you sit with step 6. Anything you want to say about step 6? Okay, so I'm running the mic again for the last time. This is the first time I've been able to do this part, so I know you're probably like, she's happy about something so silly. Okay.
You gonna give them their report back, the reflection question?
Well, the reflection question is what came out of this process for you. You just went through step 4 through 3 through 5, right? Did I get that right? I think it was 3 through 5. What came out of that for you? Or what came out of this session for you? Oh, yes, I actually got to run that time.
My name's Sean. I think kind of going into this, my conflict was years old and sort of ongoing, and I felt like going into this sort of feeling stuck in it, that this is just how it is now, sort of thing. And going through the reflections, I'm finding I have more agency in my actions to, rebuild a bridge or make that first step, sort of thing, and kind of that you don't have to do a big thing to start, that it can start small and be your own way.
Sean, that's really powerful. It gave me chills, and not just because I've been cold all day, but thank you for sharing that. That's very, very meaningful.
Yeah, I was trying to find some words I had written that was like, wow. Oh yeah, the path after rupture is about reclaiming agency. We can't control what the other person does, but we certainly can return to ourselves, clarifying our values, examining the story we carry, choose how we show up, and decide relationship boundary or release. But long story short, we have so much power that we can't see often because of everything that's happening and the emotions. And what you just shared is that I saw through this process, I actually do have some power, meaning the ability to make things happen, the ability to transform what's going on. And before I did not. I felt stuck and I felt disempowered, and now you feel empowered, and I'm thankful. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay. I'm Kelly from Helianthus Books. So my closing reflection is that there was a book that came out a couple of years ago that I love, Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg on repentance and repair, which is like when you have done wrong, what you need to do after. And this is such a nice, like other side of when something has done wrong, what do you do after? So it's like a nice completion. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's great to know that we've come alongside such, I was going to say, rich content in that book, and that it's not parallel, but it's connecting, right? So, yes, a yin and yang. I love that. Thank you all so very, very much. Please take the time to give us feedback. You know, this was the first time that we presented this content publicly. This is part of our book that we are still working on. Seems like forever. Okay. But please give us feedback, and let us know what sections could be beefed up, what could be, let go of, what could be streamlined. We really mean that. We want to get better, and we can't do that without authentic reflection. But thank you for being engaging and wonderful people. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!